Blistered hands, weary hearts. Why Christ lets us struggle. Have you ever felt like you've been rowing for so long that you can't keep going? The oars dig into your blistered hands, the wind slaps your face, and the waves threaten to pull you under. You've prayed, you've hoped, but the night seems endless. You wonder, where is he? Why isn't he here yet? You're not alone. In the darkest moments of life, it often feels like we've been left to row through the storm by ourselves. But what if the very act of rowing, the struggle, the fight, is the point? What if Christ's love for you is so great that he allows you to row, to strain against the wind, because he knows it's the only way you'll learn just how strong you really are, and just how deep his love goes? The story of Jesus walking on water comes after a long night for the disciples. As told in Matthew 14, they had been rowing for hours, fighting against the wind and the waves. Exhausted and likely terrified, they pressed on, but they must have wondered where Christ was. He had sent them ahead while he went to pray, and now, in the middle of the night, they found themselves struggling against the forces of nature. It wasn't until the fourth watch of the night, between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., that Jesus came to them. He didn't come right away. He didn't calm the sea from afar. He waited until they had spent hours battling the storm. And then, walking on the very waves that threatened to sink them, he drew near. Even then, he didn't rush to still the waters. He waited until they called out to him. There's a lesson in that delay, a lesson about the depth of Christ's love. Imagine being one of those disciples, bone-tired from rowing, perhaps a little afraid, and wondering why Jesus hadn't come sooner. But Christ knew exactly what he was doing. He was waiting for the right moment, the moment when their hearts were ready to understand the power of his presence. There's an old story about a farmer and his son who were tending to a stubborn donkey trapped in a pit. The donkey thrashed and kicked, panicking, trying to free itself, but only digging itself deeper. The son looked to the father and said, "Should we pull him out now?" The father shook his head and replied, "Not yet. He needs to stop fighting first." When the donkey finally tired, the farmer reached down, placed his strong hands beneath the animal, and lifted it to safety. The donkey had to wear itself out, had to stop thrashing before it could be rescued. We are much the same. Christ's love is always there, but sometimes we need to row a little longer, to wear ourselves out trying to do it all on our own before we're ready to truly reach for him. I think of a young woman named Sarah who found herself rowing through one of life's most bitter storms. She had just lost her job, her relationship was falling apart, and her faith seemed to waver with every crashing wave. For months she pushed forward, holding on to the hope that the storm would pass, but it never seemed to. Every day felt like a battle just to stay afloat. One night she prayed more earnestly than ever before, pleading with God to calm the storm in her life, but no answer came. Days turned into weeks, and still, the winds blew harder and the waves grew taller. She felt abandoned, like the disciples in that boat, rowing in the dark. But then something shifted. It wasn't the storm. It raged on just as fiercely. It was her heart. In her exhaustion, she found herself calling out to God, not just for rescue, but for his presence. That's when it hit her. He had been with her all along, not calming the storm, but strengthening her to endure it. In that moment, she felt peace. Not because the wind stopped, but because she knew she wasn't rowing alone anymore. Sarah's story is one of countless others who have come to realize that Christ's love is not always about stilling the storm immediately. Sometimes it's about giving us the strength to keep rowing. Christ's willingness to let us row against the wind is one of the most profound expressions of his love. He knows what we need more than we do. He sees the bigger picture when all we can see is the next wave. He knows that we'll be stronger, more faithful, and more connected to him because of the struggle. Another story illustrates this point beautifully. There was a man who used to pray every night for God to make him stronger. Day after day, he was faced with challenges that seemed to push him to the edge. One morning, tired and frustrated, he asked God why he kept sending trials his way. In that moment of prayer, the man felt an overwhelming sense of God's presence, as if God were sitting beside him, and he heard a quiet voice say, "I'm not sending you trials to weaken you. I'm allowing you to face them so you'll see how strong you already are with me by your side." In his infinite love, Christ knows that sometimes we need to row, to struggle, to endure, so that we'll understand the depth of our reliance on him. The disciples needed to row against the wind. They needed to fight through the night so that when Christ finally came to them, they would know, without a doubt, that it was his presence that brought peace, not just to the sea, but to their hearts. The most beautiful part of this story is that the disciples called out to Christ. He was already near, but he waited for them to reach out. It's the same with us. Christ is always near, always ready to come to us in our storms. But often, he waits for us to recognize our need for him. When we call out to him, we open the door for him to come into our lives in ways we couldn't even imagine. We may not always recognize him right away. The disciples didn't either. They were afraid when they first saw him walking on the water. But as soon as they called out, he responded, bringing them peace and calming the storm. This is the heart of Christ's love. He doesn't force his way into our lives. He waits patiently, letting us row through our struggles until we are ready to call out to him. And when we do, he comes, not always to calm the sea right away, but to calm the storm within us. We live in a world where we want immediate relief. We want the storm to end as soon as it starts. But Christ knows that there is growth found in the storm. When the disciples finally reached the shore, their faith was stronger. They had learned not just to fear the storm, but to trust in the one who walks on the water. Christ's love for us is so deep that he allows us to go through the storm, knowing that we'll come out the other side stronger, more faithful, and more connected to him. He lets us row because he knows we can. And when we finally call out to him, we'll see that he was with us all along, guiding us through the wind and waves. The lesson of the fourth watch is one of trust. Trust that Christ is near, even when the night is darkest. Trust that his love is guiding us, even when the wind is strong. Trust that when the time is right, he will come to us, calming the storm and bringing us safely to shore. So if you find yourself rowing against the wind, tired and blistered, remember this: Christ is near. He sees you. He knows the perfect moment to come to your aid. Keep rowing, keep trusting, and when you call out to him, he will be there, bringing peace to your heart and strength to your soul.